Now, moving on from products and cleaning products that you use within the shop, let's talk a little bit about tools.
Tools.
Okay. Now, I know your shop is very well equipped. It's not a beginner's shop. You have tools that are very specific. But talk a little bit about what tools you have in your shop, and most people that will be viewing these types of videos would know what the tools are used for, but you have some very specific tools as well. So just do a quick rundown of what tools you have in your shop, and how you came about learning how to use the very specific tools like a lathe or a mill or whatever.
Yeah, I do. I'm a very fortunate person. I know that, and I'm pretty well self-contained. So within reason, I can do pretty much anything on a bike. If I really wanted to, outside of hard chrome, I can't do hard chrome,
right,
for obvious reasons, the chemicals in the process involved with hard chroming. I can do, if I wanted to, I can paint bikes,
yes,
the tins and the tank, and I actually have done some of that. I can paint bikes, and I can zinc plate, which obviously people should know about by
yes,
now. I can nickel plate. I do have a nickel plate set up, so I can nickel plate parts if I wanted to. I have a tumbler polisher that we in some cases you might have seen in previous videos with the crushed walnut shells that I will tumble parts in for polishing purposes. In terms of the shop tools themselves, I have obviously a media blast cabinet. We talked about that a little earlier in the video that I use quite often. It's driven obviously by compressed air and electricity for the lighting. I also have an 8-inch bench grinder. It actually is vintage. It dates to pre-World War II. It's a Black & Decker. That's when they made good quality stuff. It's a serious, very serious tool. It has a brass and a steel wheel, wire wheel on it.
yes,
And that's just used for wire wheeling. I have a 6-inch, by the way, the Black & Decker grinder, it's wire wheels, is on a pedestal.
yes,
It's freestanding.
yes,
I have a 6-inch, I'm not sure it's a Delta brand, I think, bench grinder that I have a soft and harder wheel on so that I can do grinding.
yes,
That's probably, frankly, not used as much as my wire wheel.
okay,
That's mounted on the bench. I have a vintage Delta drill press that is variable speed, and that dates probably to the 1970s. It's just out of the shot here where we're sitting right now off to Pete's left. That's a freestanding pedestal mounted Delta, I think it's Delta Rockwell actually. Dates, I think I checked the serial number and dated the early 1970s. I have a 1948 vintage Montgomery Ward lathe, which was made by Logan Lathe Company, and that is original.
yes,
I got it from a friend of mine probably a decade ago. It was almost in running condition when I got that lathe. I got it for a very good price, and I had to do some minor cleanup and get the belts aligned to it because it's belt driven, off a motor that's slung up underneath. And that's just a classic American made vintage lathe, and I use that generally for making small one-off parts.
yes,
Right.
yeah. Now, who mentored you to learn how to, or to teach you how to run a lathe?
Sure, that's a great question. I'm self-taught for all practical purposes.
Oh.
However, when I was working, I'm retired now of course, but when I was working back about the time I got into this lathe a decade or so ago, I was very fortunate. There was an engineer where I worked who actually at one time taught. He was a degreed engineer, and he was at one time a teacher.
Okay.
And he was in the technical trades arena. He taught
Okay.
high school level, and he taught lathe and drill press and all those kind of machines that you'd use in the trades. And he actually was kind of my teacher.
Okay.
And so if I had a question about how do I set up a tool, how do I grind tools, what do I need to be aware of, safety concerns, because I'd never run a lathe
Yes.
before
Yes.
at that point, and he really was very instrumental in spending time with me and talk. He never came over here, but he gave me periodicals. He gave me one of those little South Bend learn how to run a lathe books from his personal library. He brought it and gave it to me, and as well as some other documentation. But he coached me from afar.
Okay. Yes.
And I started with plastic.
Okay.
Because it's forgiving. You're not throwing metal all over the place. I started, which at his advice, start with a piece of plastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with round plastic, and he even actually gave me some plastic.
Okay.
Round like dowels to work with dowel ring, nylon, that kind of thing, and taught me to take gentle cuts, how to set up tools, read the books, go to the internet, et cetera, et cetera. And he was my mentor. And then from there, I took his coaching and learned how to run the lathe, how to set it up. I did get a manual for that lathe. I mean, Logan, by the way, is still in business. The original manufacturer of this Montgomery Ward sold lathe. Logan is still around. They're out of Chicago area, Chicago, Illinois. They don't make lathes anymore, but they still supply parts.
Okay.
A lot of the parts you can still buy for that lathe.
Yes.
And their business is completely different, but they still support it, the equipment, and they have a very active web-based chat forum, etc. So that's a great resource as well.
Yeah.
So I've got the Logan made Montgomery Ward lathe. It's I think it's a 9-inch swing, and that's how big a part you can make on it.
Okay. Yes.
For people that know what lathes are. I've got a South Bend lathe over here that's in pieces that I bought from Essential and Estate 4 or 5 years ago now, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it's actually one size larger than my operating lathe, and it's in pieces because I had to disassemble it to get it here.
Okay.
This was in a basement of a condo, and to get it out of the door, we had to take it apart. And a couple friends helped me get it over here. So that's actually one of my projects probably going forward here.
Oh,
maybe when I finish
nice.
the TS50, I think I'm going to restore that lathe. And it's all there. It's got a quick change gearbox for those that knows what that is. And I think that's I'm going to say 1954.
Yes.
South Bend, 9-inch swing. It's called a 9-inch or 10-inch heavy is what it's called. And again, 10 inches of swing. A heavy meaning it's a beefier lathe than structurally than the little Logan or Montgomery Ward, which is fine for most of what I do.
Yes.
But that's the second lathe that I have that I don't necessarily need.
Yes.
I have a little benchtop mini mill. I've shown various videos of that. I bought that new.
Yes.
I don't know, 5, 6 years ago now. That's brand new. It's made in Asia. Most of those are. It's been fine, for what I do. I have added some accessories to it over the years. Some of that I've shown on my YouTube channel. Again, I make little parts for my motorcycle projects. 99% of what I do is make a bushing.
Yes.
I have to make something. I've used my tools to make parts for friends' machines.
Yes.
Excuse me. But it's basically to support my motorcycle hobbies. The machines that I have in the shop, I'm not a metal working person. I mean, that's not what my background is. I've been self-taught on the mill.
Yes.
Again, I teach myself how to run the mill. It's not that different than running the lathe. So to learn how to set up and run a mill wasn't that much of a stretch for me because I had already been running the lathe for a number of years at that point.
Yes.
So it's self-taught on the mill, and it works fine. It's small for what I do. I'm not making major pieces. I did make an operating steam engine actually on these machines, which is up on the shelf. I think I showed that in a video years ago also. That was a kit that I made it from. So I have the mini mill. I do have, let's see, what else do I have? A 20-ton shop press.
Yes.
Which we actually have done.
We did a project with that.
We did a project with that and didn't quite turn out the way we wanted to, but nonetheless, it's a 20-ton shop. It's a nice press, it really is, but it's 20 tons, so something will bend or something will give when you use 20 tons worth of pressure, so you need to know how to finesse it.
Yes.
It doesn't get used a lot in this shop. Again, I'm pushing out bearings, pushing in a bearing, that kind of thing. It's on wheels, so I can roll it around. I put wheels on it. I just got it at Harbor Freight. So,
Yes.
But it works fine.
Yeah.
20-ton shop press. I think I alluded to the little buffing setup I have.
Yes.
So I got a little buffing. Again, it's on wheels. I can move it around. So I've got the small buffing setup with different wheels, different compounds I can use. You know, if I want to polish steel, something. Again, I don't use that often.
Yes.
Maybe once a year, I get the wheels out and set it up and do my thing.
Yep.
A little bit dirty. It still tends to throw stuff all over the place.
Yes.
Makes the shop
Yes.
dirty. So I end up doing that against one of the garage doors to try to contain it. It's easier to clean up that way.
Yes.
Of course, we have the powder coating setup
Yes.
that we've again also worked into another video doing some powder coating for Pete.
Yes.
And he has first experienced the powder coating. You know, I've been powder coating for quite a while now, and I've shown it in various videos.
It's
So,
quite the process.
yeah, again, it's not complicated, but you just need to understand
Exactly.
the steps.
Yes. And the
And-
results are instantaneous. So
Yeah, they are.
That's the nice part about
Yeah,
it.
again, a little messy maybe. You got a little cleanup to do. It's like any really painting process. You
Yes,
end up with,
yeah.
the preparation for powder coating, preparing the parts, and getting everything set up, and then the cleanup afterwards is probably 80%, 90% of
Yes.
the project. The
Yeah.
applying of the powder itself, baking of the powder for 10 to 20 minutes, whatever your powder calls for, is very minimal compared to the preparation and the setup and the cleanup.
Yeah.
It's like painting of a room. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Now, alluding to the baking process, I see that you have your repurposed kitchen oven
Yes.
in your workshop.
That's how I do my powder coating.
Yes.
Yeah, I have just a 30-inch standard household range. It's electric. If you're going to powder coat with a range or an oven, stove, electric is you don't use gas. I was taught by an engineer again at work who actually was a powder coating expert. He was nationally, internationally known powder coating expert. That was his expertise, was powder coating.
That's who you want to teach.
And he came literally over here when I first started powder coating and walked me through powder coating.
Yes.
And he emphasized that if you're going to do the oven thing, and which I was looking for an oven, I was preparing to buy an oven. He said, get electric, don't get gas, don't do it in your house, don't powder coat in the kitchen oven that you bake food in. Not healthy. It is not a good idea, and you certainly are not going to make any friends of the spouse. It's going to smell up the house. Don't do it. So I found a used electric range on, again, a number of years ago on Craigslist locally, and I went and bought it. And my shop was already pre-wired for it because when I built the shop, I was anticipating getting into welding, which we
Yes.
can come back to.
Yes.
And powder coating. So the shop was pre-wired with an outlet, 240 volt
Yes.
for the range, where I put the range in the shop. And it's electric, and it's if I can get it in, get a part to fit into the oven comfortably, and you can handle it, I can
Yes.
powder coat it.
Yes.
So the limitation for my powder coating is the size of the oven.
Yes.
And being able to handle the part in and out.
Yes.
Right? Now I've done things like seat pans. I have done engine cases. I did an H1 Kawasaki triple, because that's a clamshell, and it's
Yes.
split horizontally. And a friend and I did his H1 engine case because they were silver originally.
Yes,
So we powder
yes.
coated them silver, right? Each one of them. But it took two of us to figure it out and get it in the oven and to get them out. And it worked. It barely fit,
Yes.
but it fit. But they fit. So if I can get it in the oven, and I usually work alone, so you gotta be generally handle it alone, unless I call a friend over, somebody to help, and get my wife out here to help me. You gotta be able to think that through before you powder coat.
Yes.
How am I gonna get it in and out of the oven? You don't want a part all powder coated with powder waiting to be cured, and like, uh-oh, how am I gonna get this? I can't, it won't fit, right? You're not doing it right.
Yes.
So, electric range used, I think it's Craigslist. I think I paid $50 for it,
Yeah.
a number of years ago now.
Yeah. Now, very quickly, what type of powder coating unit do you have? Where did you purchase it from? And what's your experience with it? Were you satisfied?
Sure, that's a great question. I am still using the same outfit I bought years ago. I don't know, I think about a decade now. I just bought it at Eastwood.
Okay.
It's well known in North America, US, Canada too, I suppose. It was, at the time, I think it was like $75, $80, something like that for a basic, very basic powder coating outfit. I think I might have got a little bottle of powder, came with it if I recall. And I'm still using that to this day, and it works fine for what I do. I don't need a high-tech, high-end, gizmos and gadgets. I plug it in, use the ground wire, and off I go.
Yes.
Works great. And I don't know what those run for now. They're probably more than $80. Probably 125 or 150. I haven't looked, but it's an inexpensive way to get into powder coating, and it works fine.
Yes.
We've used it on some of Pete's projects. I use it every so often, commonly on mine. Works fine. The issue with powder coating is you got to as the oven side.
Yes.
I mean, that's the challenge for most people. Their entry into powder coating is the heat.
Yes.
Now you can buy freestanding lamps, heat lamps. They're expensive. Infrared heat lamps so that you can position these to bake your part. Don't do it in the family's kitchen. I'm telling you right now, it's not a good idea for a lot of reasons, safety and otherwise. But the curing of the powder is the issue with powder coating. It's not, you can go buy a kit for, you could be probably in powder coating for a couple $100 US dollars, $200 maybe. You're going to be in powder coating if you have the way to cure it, i.e. an oven.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. I also noticed that you have a benchtop bandsaw.
Sure.
Which is, tell me where you got that and how you set it up.
Sure. Again, I think I might have done a video regarding this a number of years ago, but it's really one of those portable bandsaws I bought at Harbor Freight. One of those portable bandsaws that are designed to be held, like cut off a pipe over the, hanging over the back of the tailgate of a pickup. I simply stood it up vertically and made my own stand for it. I welded up my own stand and figured out how to mount it. There are a couple of YouTube videos out there, I think, on how to do something similar. This is really my own design, but you can go on YouTube and you can probably find directions on how to do this. I didn't do a how-to video per se.
Yes.
So I just took one of those little portable bandsaws. I don't know what they cost, $125, $150, maybe less now. I don't recall. I tilted it up, figured out how to mount it, made a frame for it, bolted it together, and made a little table for it.
Yes.
And that is my little, it's this tall, see if you can see that, portable bandsaw. I do have a horizontal, or rather I should say vertical, like this, bandsaw on the shelf that I got, again, some time ago. It's the kind that you pull the handle down, so if you had a piece of metal, like a piece of pipe, the blade would come down like this and cut it off. It's a benchtop model, yay by yay. I don't use that very much anymore. In fact, it's almost unused because I use that little vertical one I made that we just talked about. Which, for my purposes, again, I'm doing usually small metal pieces. It works perfect. It's fine for what I use. It's out of the way. It fits on a benchtop.
Yeah. Getting back to larger tools, and you alluded to your welder. Just quickly, what type of welder do you have, and what's your experience with it? Do you like working with it? Do you find it sufficient for what you do?
Sure. Well, one of the things on welders is my position is buy the best you can afford.
Yes.
There's nothing worse, in my opinion, than fighting the tool.
Yes.
So if you get a poor quality tool that doesn't work, or it gives you trouble, or you can't get it adjusted, or you're fiddling with it because you got a great price on it, I think that's false economy because it's going to frustrate you. So I have a Lincoln. It's a U.S.-made brand, Lincoln welder, very well known. Miller also makes a great welder. I'm not saying there aren't other great inexpensive welders out there.
Yes.
I don't want no comments about, I bought A and it's a great welder and I paid half the price. Great. Okay.
Yes, it works for you.
It works for you, it's your business.
Yeah.
I could afford at the time a good quality Lincoln welder. It's I believe it's a 180C. It's 240 volt.
It's a MIG.
It's a MIG welder. I can do, I think it's convertible. You can do 120 volt or 240. I run it at 240. I got to plug again in the wall. When I built the shop, I had wired for a MIG welder intentionally. I was set up for it. And I use it with gas, argon CO2 gas bottle. It will handle, flux core wire.
Yes.
It came with a little roll, and I bought it. I've never used flux core wire with it because I do it generally inside or just outside of the shop door. and I usually use 23 or 25 thousandths wire, which is pretty fine, rather than the 30 thousandths, 35 thousandths wire diameter, which is quite a bit heavier. If I was doing a lot of steel work, you're welding, bumpers
Yes.
on cars, you'd use a heavier weld wire. But for what I use, I'm doing small parts.
Yes.
I'm repairing a fender. I just leave the smaller wire in there. I might have to run 2 or 3 beads or passes.
Yes.
But again, I'm self-taught. I watched some YouTube videos back when I was learning. I did a lot of practicing. I just set up pieces of scrap steel that I got. I rounded up, and I literally sat in my shop and just practiced, fiddling with the dials,
Yes.
watching YouTube videos, running beads, cutting parts in half to see what the weld looked like, and I just taught myself to weld.
Very
I
nice.
learned many years ago. I mean, because I had a couple of years of auto mechanics in high school. We had to learn how to stick weld, and this was, I'm going to date myself, this was like 1970. And we had to learn how to, 70, 71, somewhere in there, we had to learn how to stick weld as part of the curriculum.
Yes.
So we had to be able to run a bead with a stick welder. I do have a stick welder in the corner.
Okay.
I never use it.
Yep.
For my application, maybe it's really more suitable.
Yes.
I don't even think I could probably use it if I wanted to. I'd have to learn all over again. Literally, the classes, you had to learn how to run a bead with a
Yes.
stick welder, and I could never get the doggone thing to start and stick. And
Yeah.
I got through it, but stick welding isn't really
Yes.
appropriate for what I do.
Yeah.
I don't do any aluminum welding to speak of. So TIG welding, for instance, I have a friend, Jim,
Yes.
that has a TIG weld setup. I just don't need TIG welding. I can
Yes.
get in a spool gun that will fit on my Lincoln if I wanted to do aluminum or TIG welding. I had never done it. I'm not set up for it, and it really hasn't been a hindrance for me for the
Okay.
kind of work that I do to not be able to use TIG welding.
Yeah. And last but not least, your compressor. Just tell the viewers how big your compressor is, whether it has enough CFMs for your usage, and anything else you'd like to add to it.
The compressor is a Campbell Hausfeld 60-gallon. That's 240 volt also.
Yes.
Again, it was wired. The building was wired for 240 volt for a compressor there, so it's plugged right in. It's 2-cylinder. It's plenty of oomph for what I use. I can do pretty much anything. I don't think I've ever run out of compressor. Probably the most demanding item in my shop, or that I would use a compressor for, would be the media blast cabinet, because
Okay.
it uses a fair amount of CFM air.
Yes.
But it'll keep up
Yes.
with my blasting. In fact, you've used it, Pete, and
Many
it
times.
might cycle on and off, but it will usually keep up fine. Painting, because I do HVLP painting. When I paint, I can do that, or any kind of spray painting for that matter. I've got all different kinds of guns for that. It has no problem keeping up with that. Air tools,
Yes.
I do have some air tools. We've used some air tools. No problem with any of that kind of thing. So that 60-gallon, 2-cylinder, 240 volt Campbell Hausfeld is perfectly fine for my shop. I don't need anything more. I do have it mounted on a rubber pad, about that thick, to help with isolating the vibration.
Yes.
Drain in the bottom of it, and twice a year or so I will just open the petcock and I will drain it. I'll drain in the moisture content out, because it will compressed air by its nature creates moisture.
Yes.
And it'll fill up in the bottom with a little water, and twice a year or so when I think about it, I'll drain it off.
Yes.
Right, kind of thing.
Well, that completes our portion of the major shop tools here. But maybe we can talk a little bit about hand tools, and specifically not just hand wrenches or ratchets and sockets and that sort of thing, but any specific tools that you use on a regular basis that that you have for your projects. Now, specifically, any type of flywheel pullers, any type of a clutch holder or a sprocket holder, anything like that people might want to purchase for their own shop, and how often you feel that would be in use.
Sure, that's a good question. In terms of specialty tools, I have a 2-jaw and a 3-jaw commercially made puller you can buy at any automotive supply store. I don't use them all that often. In terms of pulling flywheels off of motorcycle engines, it's Japanese in particular, because that's what I work on. I have 2 or 3 commercially made pullers that are designed to either thread onto the end of the crankshaft,
Yes.
and they're usually universal, so you can use them on different brands of
Oh,
Japanese
okay,
bikes,
yes.
because they have a standard, the Japanese thought of standards, I think, before the rest of us did. But you can spin that on and it'll pull, it pushes, what it does is the internals of the flywheel has threads.
Yes.
And as you turn that in, it will engage the internal threads of the flywheel, right? And it'll push against the end of the crankshaft.
Yes.
And it'll pop. The idea is to pop off the flywheel.
Yes.
And I have 2 or 3 of those, 2 I think, of 2 different sizes. I've used them on Hondas and Yamahas. That's commercially made. It looks like a big bolt.
Yes.
With a bolt and a bolt is what
Yeah.
it looks like. I have one of those. And I have the 2 and 3 jaw. I don't usually use those on flywheels. So the commercially made kind of the thread into the flywheel and pop off are probably the most commonly used.
Okay.
In some cases, I've had to make my own puller by taking a bolt and maybe, depending on the nuances of the project, there might be threaded holes already in the flywheel.
Okay.
It doesn't have an internal thread.
Yes.
So I'll take a piece of heavy bar stock, drill some holes in it, and thread bolts through that heavy bar stock into those threads in the flywheel that are usually there already.
Yes.
And I'll take a bolt through the middle and have to thread the internals and tighten that big bolt against the end of the crankshaft
Right.
and pull the flywheel off that.
Okay.
I have 1 or 2 of those that I've made. In terms of like clutch puller or clutch holders, I don't use commercially made. I know they have they're almost like pliers with
Yes.
hooks in them that you hook into your clutch basket to take the nut off and get the clutch basket off. What I usually do is, and again I think I might have talked about this over the years, is I will take old clutch plates.
Yes.
Usually the old set I'll take an Alva project because I almost always replace, especially the fiber plates, not necessarily the steels, but the fibers I almost always replace on a project. I will just bolt those together. So
Okay.
I'll line,
Yes.
like 3 fiber plates, 2 steel plates. I'll line up so that they fit into the basket. I'll drill a couple holes, bolt them together, like
Okay.
4 or 6 millimeter by maybe 8 millimeter long screws, bolt them together, and that will lock the clutch basket, and then I can take the bolt off and the whole thing doesn't spin.
Okay.
And I've got, I don't know how many of those I've custom made over the years. My H2 Kawasaki, that's how I got that clutch bar, and that big motor, it was
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
And I've used versions of that on pretty much every bike I've ever had to break the clutch down on. I've done it that way. Because what happens if you put a wrench, impact driver, or a wrench with a ratchet trying to get that big nut off,
Yes.
and usually the nut that holds that assembly on, the whole engine wants to turn,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And there's other ways to lock it. You could put a piece of rope, and if the cylinder is still intact, you can put a piece of rope, soft rope, into the spark plug hole, and bring it up to
Yeah.
the way, because you're going to turn typically counterclockwise the nut, so you have to turn the engine backwards and bring that nut up, or bring rather that piston up against that soft rope and wedge it in
Yes.
there. You can do that. Have I done that? Sure. Do I usually no, but it does work.
Yes.
That's a solution. Go to eBay, you'll probably find a video or 2 or 10 on that solution. That's another common way to get that spark, rather to get that clutch pack off,
Yes.
is use a rope through the spark plug.
Okay.
Now, again, I don't use it commonly, but I have.
Yes.
I usually bolt together the clutch plates and take it apart that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
In terms of other special tools, I don't really, nothing really that comes to mind I have regarding anything beyond what we've already talked about in terms of special tools. However, there are times that, it's ad hoc, so I run across something.
Yes.
Like, I had to make a puller. I took a pair of vice grips and I welded a slide hammer
Okay. Yes.
piece to it so I could clamp on, and I don't remember the application anymore. I think it was on the YL1, but it might have been the SL70. I had something I had to use a small slide hammer on, so I made my own by taking a cheap pair of vice grips
Yes.
or locking pliers. More appropriately, I got a Harbor Freight for $10. Took a slide hammer, welded it on the bar with the handle and the weight, welded that on to the locking pliers, locked it on, and we're fine. So I make them as I need them.
Okay,
Depending
yes.
on the application, what I'm trying to solve. Usually, I can use a commercially made tool for most of what I use. But
Yes.
there are times, like I've just shared, that I've had to do other things. And there's probably others here that I'm not thinking of that are buried in my toolboxes, special tools.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that pretty much wraps up all my questions for this video, but I really appreciate your time and explaining what goes on in the shop and what tools you commonly use and how you go about reconditioning parts here. So I thank you so much for that. It was
Sure.
really informative.
My pleasure, Pete. And one last thing that just occurred to me is,
Yes.
did we talk about the tumbler media?
We didn't in the vibratory tumbler. No, we didn't talk about that.
So I'll just touch briefly on the media that I use in my tumbler or polisher. And I've used probably over the years one or the other, or all of them at one time or the other rather. Ground corn cobs, crushed walnut shells, and there's other medias. You can get the little triangle
Yeah.
thingies.
Do some people use sand in it?
I don't know if anybody uses sand
Okay.
or anything you use for blast media. There might be people that
Yes.
do. I'm just not aware of it.
Okay.
But I've tried most of the commonly available media tumbling products.
Mm-hmm.
And these days I do nothing but crushed corn cobs. That's all I use.
Corn-
I'm sorry, crushed walnut shells.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
yes.
Crushed walnut shells. All I use is crushed walnut shells exclusively.
Okay.
And I'll run that for sometimes years till it gets really, really dark.
Yes.
It looks like well-used coffee grounds,
Okay.
kind of thing. I toss it and it gets really dark. And then
Yes.
just put in crushed media and walnut shells. I'm back in business.
So you find that gives you the best result for the parts that you're
Yeah.
cleaning in the tumbler.
Absolutely. It's for again, I'm doing a lot of aluminum alloys, some steel that has been polished. They need to be polished and I've zinc plated, but I find it works best for me. So that's what I
Awesome.
use. And I don't use an additive anymore. I used to use, you can get these additives. Flitz is the one brand I think.
Okay, yes.
That is an additive that's supposed to enhance the polishing process. Excuse me. Don't use it anymore. I just put them in dry and let it run. Sometimes 24, 48 hours-ish, depending on the part. I do 24/7. I set it up on a bench and let it run. And I'll check it, 2 or 3 times a day. And literally just runs
Until you're
until
satisfied
I'm
with the
satisfied. It
finish.
might be 3 or 4 days, I suppose. But
Okay.
rarely would I have to run it that long.
Yes,
But
yes.
do I use a top polisher for removal of rust or contaminate? No. It's simply for polishing.
Yes.
I find it doesn't work well.
Right.
It just takes forever. I mean, will it remove rust? Maybe eventually.
Yes.
I have much quicker methods. The wire wheel, the blast media cabinet,
Right. Right.
hand brushing with a wire brush, steel wire brush, far faster. Am I going to screw with trying to remove rust from a small part and by throwing it in tumbler? No, I use it simply for finish polishing.
And polishing. Yeah. Okay.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, that was just a little add.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions, Peter?
That's everything.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
Well, I think that's going to be a wrap on this video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts? Drop Pete a note.
I'll ask the questions.
Yeah, he'll ask the questions. Otherwise, as usual,
Thanks for watching.